Hello and welcome to the second episode of the Broadcast Newswrap. That's right, one-hit wonder, we are not. And this is your shorthand guide to the week's TV news stories, brought to you by the Broadcast editorial team. If you want to check out this podcast, previous or future episodes, you can find us on Spotify and iTunes, or on the website www.broadcastnow.co.uk. I'm Broadcast Senior Reporter Max Goldbart, and on today's show, I'm joined by fellow reporter Joanna Tilley to talk about ITV. Fresh off the back of Director of Television Kevin Lygo's Edinburgh Controller session, just what does the short and medium-term future hold for the UK's biggest commercial broadcaster? Turning to Channel 4, what is happening with the Steph show? Brought forward in the schedules to satisfy audiences during the COVID-19 lockdown, regularly drawing less than 200,000 viewers per day, the show was placed on hiatus within just 6 weeks. Ian Katz blames the neighbours, but we're going to delve deeper into the short history of one of the production sector's most discussed new shows of 2020. All that, plus what we're watching on today's Broadcast News Wrap. I'm joined by my fellow reporter, Joanna Tilley. Jo, how are you?
I am joyous. How are you?
Joyous. I'm doing okay. It's been a long time since I've seen you as we embrace the lockdown for what I think is week 7. What have you been up to outside of work?
I've been running. I've been doing some good old running. I know that you like running. Sunbathing as well. It's been all right.
Lovely weather for the old sunbathe. It is grey as hell outside.
Yeah, I know. It's funny, isn't it? Because I almost felt like sunshine and lockdown went hand in hand, and cruelly that's been taken away from us.
Someone who may or may not have been enjoying the weather is Kevin Lygo. Who knows? He's the director of television at ITV, and you've been just watching his controller session, the Edinburgh Controllers. What did you think were the key takeaways?
When it came to drama, you couldn't, if you were an indie producer making drama, I don't think you could take many positives away from what he was saying. It just sounds like it's going to be the most hit genre for sure, with the production costs and the social isolation measures and the overseas shoots. Although ITV actually make quite a lot of their dramas domestically anyway, but it just felt like drama was one headache too many. That's the takeaway I got.
Is that the way that he was phrasing it, or is that your read of the situation?
I think he was basically saying that there's going to be a bit of a bun fight, is that right, over talent? And BBC have already secured Vicky McClure in their upcoming show Trigger Point, so it's a case of I think, is there enough talent to go around? Is there enough crew to go around? Is everyone going to start filming at the same time? Obviously, the budgets are so massive, they don't have the advertisers to back those budgets. So, I mean, I think maybe a lot of it that will boil down to cost.
I don't think the talent bun fight can be understated. If everything, it seems like stuff will really start recording in earnest in about a year's time, with little bits in the middle in terms of like fully fledged high-end TV drama. Piers Wenger earlier this week, if we're sort of going wider on the drama angle, he cited actors' schedules as the biggest challenge facing the return to production.
I think there was a question asking, is this a time to try out new talent? And he said what he's always said in the past is that, people don't go to ITV for new talent. They don't. They go to ITV for big names, familiar faces, and, big shows. So I don't think it's a case of like, let's find a substitute for, I don't know, Vicky McClure or whoever it is.
I was listening to Patrick Holland this morning and listening to Piers the other day, and Ian Katz has been on as well yesterday. And they're all talking about development and nurturing and the opportunity. Considering that you can't film anything, this is the time to be getting the best new writers coming through for 1 or 2 years' time. It's fair enough to hear Kevin not mince his words in that respect.
I just think, in a way, the soaps are a drama in themselves, aren't they? You've got to pick what you go for. He seems to be picking the soaps.
It seemed like the key takeaway was what he was saying about the soaps, and I was seeing a lot of this stuff on Twitter in the past couple of hours. We're recording on Thursday, 30th April afternoon. So what was he saying about the soaps?
Well, yeah, other than saying they basically define the channel, he was saying that, Emmerdale and Coronation Street were both looking really carefully into how they can, film under, social isolation measures. Like, obviously, Neighbours has started filming in Australia, so they'll probably be keen to find out exactly what they're doing there. But, I've read things about, different entries for different actors and perspex sheets to hide certain people, and I mean it's still unclear whether they're even going to be able to start filming them in the next couple of months.
Yeah, it seems like a lot of these ideas are being floated. And again, going back to Piers Wenger, I mean, he's talking about quarantining cast and quarantining crew, which is like, I don't know, that seems like quite an extreme, expensive idea that I'm not sure they would be able to do anytime soon.
Well, they mentioned that with Lygo as well, but he wasn't really drawn on it, if that was something they were going to look into or not.
That key line that everyone seems to have drawn from, the ITV is barely ITV without the soap. You feel he's slightly shooting himself in the foot almost by so talking up ITV's reliance on the soaps with, what, a few weeks left until they totally run dry.
I think he likes the drama, ironically, after all that I just said. But he also said that he doesn't want there to be a break in the soaps because people will get used to the detox and they might get a life. Okay, it weren't these words verbatim. He basically said that he doesn't want people to get used to not having the soaps on and get a life instead.
Not mincing words. And what was he saying about Love Island? Those are the other big question marks over the ITV schedule, seems to be Love Island at the moment. Does he have an answer?
It's funny, isn't it? Because it's one of their biggest shows, definitely their biggest show for young people. And you would think that he would reassure people, but nothing he really said made me think there's going to be a Love Island in June. He just basically made it sound that tonally it might be off. I think he used the word slathering, people slathering themselves on each other whilst everybody else is, all by themselves. And then he also said there's hundreds of people that I imagine fly out there, and that's not even in our control, is it? It's what Spain decides. So how can you know that we're 6 weeks away from when they would fly out there?
Are they thinking of doing it towards the end of this year then, or maybe stick with the winter edition, which is early next year, or again, is it a bit too early to tell?
Well, I mean, I imagine that their first decision is going to be whether they do this one in June. You can't really make any decisions until you know if you can fly to a country. He said they had actually thought about filming it in Cornwall, but they decided that isn't a show that they make. The show is about the sunshine and the sort of escapist feel that people keep on talking about. If it was filmed in Newquay, would we really feel such a sense of escapism?
Surely not. It would be raining.
It'll be great. You get hit by a surfboard.
Yeah, exactly. They'd be all indoors the whole time. It would be ridiculous. What do you think overall? I mean, there's been a load of focus on Channel 4 and Channel 4's reaction to the COVID lockdown. And I think some of that comes because Channel 4 has to commission so many third-party indies. Well, what do you think about ITV's general reaction to COVID-19? Do you think broadly it's been welcomed and they've made some good decisions?
I think that in terms of current affairs, they've been making some quite good decisions. I mean, Tom Giles seems to be quite busy. He commissioned one of the first coronavirus docs made by Shine TV, A Very British Lockdown. Also, the Martin Lewis Money Show, they wasted no time getting that on the air, and that's vital for, people at the moment. And then, of course, Tom Moore, who every time I see him, I think I start crying. He also commissioned his show, Captain's Tom War. So that's some really great commissioning work there. But to be honest, as Lygo said in the session, he said he didn't really want to be making these fast turnaround, filmed at home shows. It wasn't really what ITV were about. He said that you're kind of set half making a show and, I kind of agree, whereas Channel 4 have been kind of taking the opposite approach and they've commissioned loads of shows. Commissions are coming through every few days and I don't know which tactic is right, but as you said, I think for indies it's a very good sign that Channel 4 are commissioning so many shows.
It's a tricky one, isn't it? And you almost think to yourself, what is the better approach? Just lots of that fast turnaround stuff that Channel 4 seems to have gone for, or just cutting your losses and accepting that you have a really great back catalogue, you've got ITV Hub, you've got BritBox, dare I say it. Is it better to focus everything on post-lockdown and just hope that the viewers will see enough in your back catalogue to keep going? I've heard murmurings that Channel 4 may have jumped the gun a little bit on commissioning a little bit too much of this fast turnaround stuff.
What, in terms of delivering it or in terms of the quality? In
terms of the quality, I think already the feeling is that the viewer might be getting a little bit fed up with living room stuff.
Aren't you looking forward to
Snoop Dogg? Yeah, we can't get away from this without talking about Snoop Dogg's.
Are you going to start rapping?
I was tweeting about it and I accidentally called it Snoop Dogg's with 2 G's. I wanted it to be called after him so badly. And yet the 1 G is critical.
Do you know what? I agree with Katz on this. I think that is a brilliant idea. And I mean, it is through the keyhole, isn't it? But I mean, utilising dogs to show off houses when people are so interested in what other people's houses look like. And the name is silly. You can imagine it being quite a fun show. I personally think if they get it right, we could have it forever.
Do you know what was even more entertaining for me, Tilley, was watching Ian Katz squirming while trying to describe how fun and entertaining Snoop Dogg's was. And I imagine his mind was just casting himself back to the days of being deputy editor at The Guardian.
I think that he looked like he was over the moon about that.
Maybe.
Cock-a-hoot.
Cock-a-hoot.
Cock-a-poodle. He loves dogs, so I mean, there you go.
Well, that brings us to another topic of the day, which is Channel 4's The Steph Show, placed on pause this week after just 6 weeks, having initially been brought forward in the schedules and recorded from Steph McGovern's living room. Tilley, why has The Steph Show been placed on pause?
There are a few answers. If you talk to Joe Street, I think it's a combination of the intensity of making that show and the fact that when they commissioned it, they did not realise how long lockdown was going to last. If you heard Cats the other day, it was potentially about the neighbours. And I think The Sun actually wrote a piece about the fact that, the neighbours had been disgruntled. But you can't avoid the ratings, can you, Matt?
It's hard to feel good about those, isn't it? And you can't really get away from, 150 to 200,000 on average per day?
I think it was about 150, 120.
120
last
average.
Few days of the show.
Whenever I see numbers that low, I always think about the amount of people that have bar boxes in the country. And so roughly 150,000 people is about 10 or 11 people with a bar box saying they're watching it. And obviously that should be reflective of the rest of the country. But you do just think launching a nice daytime format at a time when most of the country is stuck at home, and they would have been hoping to do a little bit better, I imagine. And it's very difficult to tell when it's going to be on now, right? I mean, again, this sort of goes back to what we were talking about before, about restrictions, and they certainly haven't put a date yet, have they, on when it's going to formally launch in a studio?
Joe Street made it quite clear that they want an audience and they want to be in the studio. And I think that means that, we probably aren't thinking in the next few months there's going to be quite a wait for the Steph Show to come back. And I don't know whether there's going to be any damage done from the fact that they did this, or whether the audience will just go, well, here we go again, kind of thing.
I feel like there might be some real regret attached to this, because when it does eventually launch, it will forever be, there'll be a little bit of a cloud over it, won't there? And everyone will refer back to those first few weeks when Steph McGovern ran into her garden and Keith Lemon looked a bit bemused like every day, or at least on the couple of episodes that I watched. A senior indie source questioned what this could mean for Ian Katz.
They are commissioning shows, and they put it forward 3 weeks. So it wasn't like they were going to have to make this show unless they postpone the whole thing. But I don't think that would have gone down very well with anyone either. So it's not like they had an easy decision to make.
Just before we started talking, I was having a look at some comments on broadcast. Channel 4 puts the Steph Show on pause, and I think parts of the indie sector at least will be licking their lips in delight. For anyone not across the kind of controversy that surrounded the Steph Show, there was a tender towards the end of last year for the indie that was going to produce the Channel 4 daytime format, and that tender was won by Expectation, along with a northern indie, Can Productions. Expectation being Notting Hill-based production house run by Tim Hinks and Peter Fincham. And there has been relative bits of bad blood from indies towards the relationship between Channel 4 and Expectation.
Expectation seemed to be the most popular indie in terms of entertainment with Cats, and their shows have had mixed success. A Nations and Regions production, you would think that it would be good if that was being made primarily by an indie in the north or in Leeds. And I can, or Hebden Bridge, they're sort of not far away from Leeds. But I think that decision ruffled a few feathers. So every time there's now a story about Expectations, there's a group of people who don't warm to Cats.
Having said that, we've got a new Expectation show out on Monday, I believe. Mo Gilligan in his house, Channel 4.
First,
Bill Harris
commission was a Expectation one as well. So, I mean, can you complain? Mo Gilligan, he's a talented performer. The Mo Gilligan show I actually really enjoyed. I thought it was a very good show. So if you're going to make a show with any talent, I think Mo Gilligan is a good person to choose.
He's a funny guy, and I think you can say what you want about Expectation, but talent relationships are clearly something that they have gone for from the off. And that has allowed them to slightly reversion or re-pitch ideas so that when something like a global pandemic happens, they can quickly run back to Mo Gilligan and say, why don't we literally just do it in your living room and there's a new show. In that way, that can be applauded.
Yeah, I think one of the comments on one of the pieces said that it would be an oversight if Expectation hadn't pitched the Mo Gilligan show. And I think I agree with them. Like, you've got that talent. He's already filming, I'm sure, things from his house and doing all his social media. You know, if you hadn't pitched that show, surely it's ready to be pitched.
So what have we been watching this week, Joanna Tilley?
Well, I have been watching BBC Three's beautiful, beautiful, beautiful drama, Normal People.
Three beautifuls. Joanna Tilley, we spoke a little while ago and you'd read the book and in a very contrarian manner, you decided you didn't like the book. You were probably in a very small number of people who didn't.
Yeah, it's really weird. I was like completely unfazed by the book, and I definitely think I'm in the minority there. I can't remember anything from reading the book. You know, when you read a book and literally a week later you're like, what happened? Who was in it? I don't know. But in a way that's really helped, because it's meant I've gone into this drama with like very little expectation and no really clue about what's going to happen. And I just think it's just phenomenal. I really do. I think it's so visceral and it just captures the feelings, and it's sort of simple, but the depth is there. And I mean, I just think it's such a beautifully done piece of work. And I've only watched 2 episodes, but it feels like they've hit the ground running. Like, so often with dramas, you watch them and you think, oh God, this makes me feel uncomfortable, or what's happening? And they wouldn't do that in real life. And I just stopped watching basically quite early on. But this one is just, it just feels believable and real and sincere. And I just think, well done.
And what else have you been watching, Joanna Tilley?
I've also been watching comedy Feel Good on Channel 4, which I really, really recommend. I think it's totally the kind of thing that is uplifting to watch in lockdown, but then at the same time it sort of confronts a lot of serious issues in relationships and just how hard and great and difficult and fun it is to fall in love. And I just think it's been written with real sincerity. It reminds me a lot of This Way Up, Aisling Bree's recent comedy. I think tonally they're quite similar, but I really would recommend Feel Good. So Max, what have you been watching on the old Boxy Rooney?
I finished off Sunderland Till I Die on Netflix, series 2.
Did he die?
Nobody dies apart from footballing spirit, but I couldn't have enjoyed it more, really. In series 2, the almost coming close to parody owners take charge. This really, really funny, posh marketing bloke called Charlie Methven and a guy from the West Country called Stuart Donald. And watching them try and run a football club is extremely entertaining. The community spirit from the Sunderland fans is joyous to watch. And unfortunately, maybe this comes across as slightly narcissistic, but it's just good to watch a sports documentary where a team is doing a bit shit and losing, and it's quite enjoyable.
No one's winning or losing at the moment, are they?
No, exactly. I was wondering whether they'd started a 3rd series and had to pause it, but I think they actually haven't been filming this year and were doing a pause. So maybe those guys at Full Well 73 foresaw the COVID-19 pandemic.
Well, they are pretty smart there, aren't they, at Full Well 73? Can I just ask you what you thought of Normal People?
We're halfway through. I think it's absolutely fantastic. And it's interesting, the fact that you didn't like the book but are enjoying the TV series, I am surprised by, because I feel like rarely have I seen a show that is so true to its source material. It almost feels like I'm watching the book. It's got all of the scenes. The actors have really captured what they're like in the book. It's written by Sally Rooney, who wrote the book, and I feel like in part it's extremely similar.
I do completely agree with you, and yet it's still true. I didn't really like the book. So I think that's just me, maybe.
Thank you for listening to the 2nd episode of the Broadcast Newswrap. I'm senior reporter Max Goldbart, and I've been speaking with my fellow reporter Joanna Tilley. If you want to check out previous or future episodes, you can find us on Spotify and iTunes, or on the website www.broadcastnow.co.uk. And don't miss next week's Broadcast Newswrap, as we bring all the best news and analysis from the Edinburgh Controller sessions, plus much more.